warm greetings, everyone. On behalf of Friday.Waters, an initiative of the W4W Foundation, a think tank built as Citizens Collective, we welcome you to today's session. Well, Friday.Waters is a continuation of signature series Wednesdays for Water. The idea of Friday.Waters is to bring water knowledge available in the various alternate forms at one place for developing a better understanding about the water matters in different possible ways. The activities initiated in Friday.Waters include water talkies, water reading club, water thesis club, water arts, and meet a maestro. Each of these sessions take place once a month. The Friday.Water sessions are designed to be fun-filled and yet be fruitful. At W4W, we really believe that water conversations are extremely crucial for water conservation. And in here, we are trying to develop a knowledge bank, an open access water knowledge for people to learn about water, acknowledge and appreciate the beautiful entity that is water, and also the complexity, and take their own sweet little time to understand about the nuances of water. My name is Mansee Bal Bhargava, and I am the host for today and from W4W. Today we have Professor Pradeep Thalapil as part of the Meet a Maestro session to share his insights on can water droplets make soil. And I must acknowledge that we are also celebrating 300 plus sessions. And we have this Meet a Maestro series where we are trying to really get legends like him to understand and pick up a part of their brains to see how they have, carried out their journey in the water sector. And I'm also pleased to share with you that this is the first session where we are actually trying to understand the relationship of water and soil. So first talk after 300 sessions plus, that we are going to know a little bit more about soil and its relation with water. So before we begin, let me briefly introduce him with his long career as well as awards and acknowledgements which he has received in his life. It's important as part of our ritual at W4W that we introduce our speaker. Professor Thalapil Pradeep is at IIT Madras, which is Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, Chennai. He is the Deepak Parekh Institute Chair Professor and also a Professor of Chemistry. He studied at University of Calicut and IISc, UC Berkeley and Purdue. His research interests are in molecular and nanoscale materials. He is author of several scientific papers in journals and an inventor of over 100 issued patents, of course, and also book authored. He's involved in development of affordable technologies for which, I'm also very interested to learn about him because he has this social angle also in his whole scientific work. Affordable technologies for drinking water purification, and some of them which have been commercialized as well. His pesticide removal technology has reached out to over 10 million people. His many other water problems have been really taken very well, both in industry as well as in the society. So along with his associates, he has incubated 7 companies and 3 of them have production units as well. He's author of several books, just to name a few, the introductory textbook Nano Essentials, and also the monograph Nanofluids, and an advanced textbook of nanoscience and nanotechnology. I guess from here we can just pick up some of the things where he's heading for in his talk. But before I close his biography, and I'm going to put it in the chat box more, he has received Lifetime Achievement Research Award from IITM and Distinguished Alumnus Award from IISc. And he supports, as part of his philanthropy, a school in his village where 500 students are enrolled. He has received several awards, as I was mentioning earlier. Just to name a few, the Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Prize, the World Academy of Sciences Prize in Chemistry, and our own very Padma Shri in India, and Niti Asia Prize. I'm just saying a few of them. Thank you, Pradeep sir, for accepting our invite and also agreeing to take out time from your schedule. We are very keen to learn from what you have really learned in your life and you are willing to share with us. Welcome to the session once again, and thank you for our 300 plus celebration and being part of this session. Over to you, sir, and we look forward to learning from you.
Thank you, Madam Mansee, for this kind introduction. I'm so glad that a discussion meeting on water, principally focused on water, has crossed 300 sessions. Normally, most of these discussions on water disappear after some time. And of course, water is something that makes you disappear many things. But then hopefully some of these thoughts will stay with you. Therefore, I thought I would speak about something very different than what I would have normally talked about in such a meeting. I do build water technologies. Several of them are in the market, as Mansee talked about. But there are many others that we work on which may eventually reach the market people. And there are others which are very fundamental. They may end up in textbooks. While I have talked about all of those in several presentations which you can access on my website, this one is something very new that has just happened this year. And there are many possibilities that kind of a research outcome can throw to people, the enormous opportunities they present. Therefore, water also presents, water is not only something that is a solution or should be solutions, water also presents opportunities for tomorrow to discover, to innovate, to build new organizations. And my attempt, therefore, is to kindle your enthusiasm, direct your interest to that, especially for those youngsters who are joining, would see this as an opportunity to use information such as these to build their future. So with that introduction, let me get into this, and also to tell you that because of the diversity of the audience, I will not get into a lot of technical details. And these details will certainly take some time and certain understanding of physics and chemistry and material science. Therefore, I will not dwell on that. It will be more going into what is this that I'm talking about and what are the implications. And of course, I will point out why this is happening. What is this phenomenon behind whatever that I am talking about. So this slide is essentially about what I am and my background. You can read more about what I do in my website. So people look at materials in many, many ways. Materials are just before you, like a piece of some rock in front of you. But there can also be materials like this, what you see on the screen. These are bubbles. One would say that these are confinement. Bubble is a confinement of matter. But these are bubbles that you can see with your eye. There are also confinements of very small sizes, which you can't see. And I normally work on these, and these are called nanomaterials. So on the one side, this is what is called physical confinement. When it is very tiny, we call them electronic confinement. The confined material is confined, but electrons are also confined. So that's why they are nanomaterials. And these fellows, whether it is confinement in this scale or confinement at the length scale of electrons, they are all used for sustainability. And I use them in the context of water. There are others who use them to capture CO2. There are some others who use the CO2 to convert to methanol. There are others who put such things in your catalytic converters, in your engines, so that the world is cleaner. So there are many, many examples how sustainability comes along from these such materials. So in the process of studying all that, we published a paper. You see, we published a paper like this. So this is in one of the most celebrated places called Science. In this, we said that take some sand, as you can see, and put pieces of this tiny sand through a tiny nozzle Mix it with water, of course. This is this water mixed with this sand, tiny particles, spray to form droplet. Take some water, spray it. And it is so tiny. What we found was that when such particles are there, when particles come out, when you apply an electric field, they break apart, and these big particles, which are expanded here, they become like nanoparticles. You see, look at this, 5 micron particles become something like 5 to 10 nanometer particle. What does this mean to you? Micrometer is 10 to the power minus 6 meter. What is nanometer? 10 to the power minus 9. So 10 to the power minus 6 become 10 to the power minus 9. That means 1,000 times reduction in the size of the particle occurs just by creating these sprays of this water. How can this be? And I'm going to tell you that story. This is happening. And what is its implication to soil? So here is a rock. This rock is called giant rock in America. This is a 22-meter tall rock. And these rocks, over a long period in your younger years in textbooks, you must have studied that these rocks become soil. This is a rock, as I told you, it takes millions of years for these rocks to become soil. Here I told you that this rock, which is several meters tall, becomes a millimeter-sized particle of sand in just the time required for these drops to form. That is 30 milliseconds. Such a millisecond time scale, rocks become nanoparticles. So you look at this. This happens in millions of years. The other one happens in milliseconds. That is the excitement. I tell you, tomorrow, you might probably study this in your textbook. You see? And this is a scale of 1,000. That is a meter becoming a millimeter. A meter is 1,000 millimeters. That becomes 1 millimeter sand in millions of years. So what is this happening? We have been studying this confinement called droplets for a long time. These droplets, we call them micro droplets because they are micrometer in dimensions. And they become they can make nanoparticles, and we studied these. We can probably skip this slide that we have studied many different types of nanomaterials from droplets or using droplets. So this is something that happens in the laboratory. Several students worked on it, they got their PhDs, and they continue to do this. If you take some nanoparticles, one is a rod-like particle, another is a sphere-like particle. If you put them in this droplet, we have seen that the rods go to the surface and the spheres come to the center. So this we call phase separation. We study some interesting phenomena like this. Just to give you a sort of background. Okay, we can see if these particles go to the periphery. Can I see it? I can see by microscopy. With some good cameras, I can see. I can also see the transformation of particles in droplets. Take some nanoparticles we make in the laboratory. Your children may go to the laboratory, make some nanoparticles. When you make nanoparticles of silver, for example, they become like this. There are all kinds of shapes of particles, smaller, larger, and all that. But you put these particles in a suspension in this kind of an apparatus. You spray this solution in the form of these droplets. What we found was that when you apply a potential, these kinds of non-uniform particles become extremely uniform particles. This is to say that non-uniform particles, larger, smaller, etc., become very uniform. How can this be? Well, these particles contain several hundreds of chemical bonds, or maybe 1,000 chemical bonds, and they are breaking in these droplets. And they are coming together somehow and becoming this. Because all particles, these contain atoms. So atoms have to break apart, atoms have to come together. You know that water is made of atoms, right? H and O, H and O, two hydrogens and one oxygen. So atoms come together to make materials. Now, if this is what is happening, hundreds of chemical bonds are broken, I ask this question, what is the limit of such breakage? Can I break 1,000,000 bonds? Huh? Can I make a billion bonds? You know why I'm interested in this? Because people, when I say droplets break chemical bonds, you in water community would like to know whether droplets, can they break a polymer? Can they break a drug molecule? Can they break today's news story is PFAS? Can you break all this? Yes, people are working on this. Can this be made into technology? Yes, people are working on these technologies. So droplets are very interesting from this perspective. Droplets are also very interesting when you say bonds are broken, bonds can also be made. When you break make new bonds, you can actually make a drug molecule. So is it possible to do that? People are doing these kinds of things as well. So I said, bonds are broken. Now I ask this question, can I break not 100 bonds, 1 bond, 100 bonds, 1,000 bonds? Can I break 1,000,000 bonds? That took me to this question. See, I have a drop. I just want to break a rock. Now the rock has to be small to put into the drop. The drop is a micrometer size drop, or several tens of micrometer. And therefore, the rock has to be smaller piece, okay, which can be put into that. Okay, so this is the experiment that we are doing. Now, of course, you can put any rock in this. But you see, rocks are plenty in the literature, in the world. See, I work on arsenic. And I go to British Museum of in London. And I want to see how many different kinds of arsenic minerals are there in the world. You go to that section, you will find thousands of minerals. So it is important to take what you want to break. You have to ask that question very carefully. This is very important in research. Research fellows, people cannot go on doing this very same experiment, right? You have to do this experiment on, of course, experiments are expensive. You have to be very careful, you have to think about it. So I asked, what is the mineral I should break? You see, when you break minerals, you get small particles. And I addressed this problem of water, as Mansee was talking about, some way that I have addressed this problem. What is the next problem to address, of course? I want to address the problem of food. To address the problem of food, the best rock that I should address is, well, soil. What is the soil? Soil is by and large silica. And so I need to address this problem. What? Break silica. So if you look at sand, sand is nothing but silica. Silica is nothing but quartz. So these are quartz in different forms. So having decided that I need to break quartz, quartz is very tough. Quartz is what I need to address. Quartz is silica. Then the problem became very simple. I have to just go to my friend who is, in my laboratory next door, and I took some silica from him. So this is silica from Ennur river sand. It is a standard sand. You can take any sand. So I took some sand. And then I have to put this in the droplet, right? In the droplet. So to do that, I have to grind it. This sand is very big, 1 millimeter. It won't go into this micrometer droplets. So I break it. I break it and I see it's like bacteria size, little larger than bacteria. Several microns big fellow. And then this is optical microscope, by the way, what you see here. And I put this in this, a small needle, and put a suspension of these particles, put it through this. The smaller particles I remove completely, larger particles I remove completely. But by the way, this is an experiment, okay? Okay, so now you put this through and you apply a potential. So when you apply this potential, water sprays. Just like a tip, you apply a potential and then water starts spraying. This is called electrospray. This is a phenomenon that is known, and that as people have studied it, one person got a Nobel Prize and all that. This is something very well-known phenomenon. You spray, you keep a distance. So this distance is variable. At the end, you collect this, whatever is the product that comes out, and you collect it on what is called a TEM grid, transmission electron microscopy grid, to measure the microscopic image. Put it under an electron beam and collect this material and put it under this electron beam. Electron expands, and this is the electron that image. Now you can see what you got. Originally, you had these big particles. It became very tiny. Suddenly. And you expand one of these particles, you see atoms. These are atomic planes of silica. So you see, you get crystalline particles, originally huge, massive fellows. Massive, you have to think in terms of this microscopic dimension. Massive fellows, it became very tiny. Oh. So I asked this question to the student, Spurti, you are seeing this, but is it only silica? Can there be something else? So my source now of silica changed. So I went to a friend of mine who keeps gems. Who keeps gems. So he gave us 140 gems. One such gem is ruby. Ruby is a very tough thing. Your mother, maybe your sister may be wearing it. It's on the ring and all that. Very tough. And I make microparticles of that and then put it through this tube and then spray it. What I see is nanoparticles. Oh, is it? Then I put other minerals. Yes, they also do that. What about alumina? I told you silica. I took to this ruby is chromium doped alumina. Color is coming from that chromium doping. Alumina is very tough. I can actually buy it synthetically made alumina. So this is natural, this is synthetic. It looks like this. Expand it under a microscope. That becomes this. Microns become nano, right? Okay. Now comes this question. These are all very tiny, 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 in this very tiny bit that you see. But is it really happening? You have to show it, then you have to do what is called bulk measurement. Do it in a larger quantity of material. Larger quantity of materials are generally studied by something called X-ray diffraction. So this is X-ray diffraction of silica. Now these particles, which are originally I start with, and I see the same diffractogram, but by width. This increased width tells me that actually a nanoparticle has been formed. From this width, I can calculate the particle dimension. It is 16 nanometers. Oh, so bulk characterization also tells me that instead of changing, many other things we did to vary the potential. So I do 3.5 kV, 4K, 4.5 kV, etc. And I find that the particles form only in this window. Below that, no particles form. And the larger particles, particles change their shape. So all these are very interesting because when particles become change shape like these, they have larger surface area. when they have large surface area, I can probably put some pest fertilizers on them. More fertilizer, more urea, more, all that can be put in. So very interesting. Okay. So I asked this question that why is this happening? So I didn't have a reason why this is happening. So I asked my friend who is in Bangalore, in this institute called Jawaharlal Nehru Center for Advanced Scientific Research. Fellow, go and calculate how this particle breaks. So there is a lot of physics in it, so I'm not going to tell you all that. But he tells me that particles actually can cleave in droplets. And not only that, they can cleave, when the water droplet size is very tiny, you might have heard from newspapers that water droplet is acidic. That acidic tells you that there are protons on the surface. These protons actually can induce changes in a crystalline particle such as these, and then cause crystals to slip like the one that I told you. If you slip too much, it will break apart. So I can calculate this slip. And today we understand, I'm skipping all these to tell you that it is possible. Particles can slip and form these individual particles. Now it is possible that when particle slips, a tiny, tiny, tiny piece can come out. And that tiny, tiny piece is called silicate. I can detect all that in what is called mass spectrometry. So I know that these things happen. And today we know that when a particle droplet is there with rocks like these, when the the droplet size comes down, as the droplet is moving through air, water is evaporating from it, and the droplet is charged because I apply a charge, and the charge is more and more charge is focused on the smaller and smaller dimension. The smallest dimension droplet, which is holding together by surface tension is a unifying force. But droplets, when they have charge, the charge is a repelling force because these two charges repel each other. Then the charge's repulsion is too much, the surface tension cannot hold it together, the drop will break apart. When the drop breaks apart, at that point, dotted droplets form, and that point at which you do get nanoparticles getting chipped out from this thing, and ultimately nanoparticles get formed, is what we said in this paper. But there are many, many interesting things can happen. And like this, about 100 years ago, this person called Raleigh talked about many things. You know what? A droplet, when it breaks apart, boom, it breaks apart. There are a lot of pressure fluctuations that happen inside, pressure. And this pressure fluctuation can be so intense that it can be something like of the order of thousands of atmospheric pressures, thousands. And this kind of huge pressures will crush a particle, can crush something. So we say that such things can happen. And many, many interesting phenomena can happen. And a very distinguished person in this area, wrote a perspective on this article to say what are all the possibilities. Think about the possibilities. A droplet, when it is breaking apart, a rock is breaking. When the rock is breaking, maybe within that rock droplet, there can be molecules present there. And on the surface of these rocks, these molecules can react. And ultimately, maybe amino acids can form. Amino acid, meaning you can actually make proteins, which means you can live. So many interesting possibilities occur, many, many other things he talked about. Okay, how are these rocks forming? When rocks breaking, when the rock is broken, at some point in time, then just beginning to separate, it may be possible to capture things like this. Just a rock is breaking apart. So we do a lot of interesting studies in this area. I will not take your time. I'm going to close this by saying this is not just silica. Anything can be broken. These are some molybdenum sulfide sheets which are broken. Today in the literature, you must have heard that there is something called graphene, which breaks. And we can study this. Why am I doing it? I told you this soil, no? Why am I doing it? These tiny things called nanoparticles, in a laboratory, we study that. People ask me question, what is this tiny thing that you're studying, professor? But you know what? These tiny things today, we make nanoparticle-based filters in the market. So these are removing contaminants. And we have put up plants like these, not just one, two, or something, 1,700 of these community purifiers across the country. And that is what Mansee was talking about, millions of people getting benefited, right? So this happens. So I have this background of very tiny thing that you research on, you make something big out of that. Okay, so now we make such research and go to products like these. Many, many different products come out of the lab. We also develop sensors and deploy these sensors to study water quality across. And these data are coming on the screen. But today, you won't see it online, but this is protected. This is actually available to government. Now, something very interesting for you. That is, if you study water and its quality, you can actually put this, geospatial coordinates and collect that information. Each one of these data points look like one data point. It is not one, it's a collection, hundreds of data points from Delhi region or Chennai region or Coimbatore region, etc. We do this data collection by educating students. Students go to the field and collect the data. This would mean, with increased awareness, water citizenship or water warriors, we can build water data. So I have all this background. What does this mean? If I have droplets, and these droplets are really breaking sand, maybe it is these sand particles would have resulted in nanoparticles, which would have enriched this earth. What am I saying here? You're all eating rice or wheat or something. You know how rice and wheat stands up? Rice and wheat stand up because of silica. The stem of rice is standing up because of silica. This silica comes where? Comes through the roots. And nanoparticles are being taken in. So these nanoparticles of silica are essential ingredients of soil. And it is these essential ingredients of soil which have cooked all these interesting molecules. And maybe these molecules are the ones, or the particles are the ones which have created fertile soil which make us live. If that is so, imagine a scenario where you have sand, and I have a city like this, which is producing wastewater. Using that wastewater, which is processed, I convert this sand to soil. Active ingredients of soil, I can probably have this. If I have this, I can certainly address the world food crisis. You know that desertification is happening, deserts are expanding, the fertile land area is shrinking, and population is increasing. And this is a very large challenge. And I told you a story by which a new idea can ultimately go to solve the world food crisis, make the deserts bloom. If that happens, of course, it involves investment. I'm not talking about milligrams, kilograms, etc. I'm talking about millions of tons of soil. And this will happen when some of you get excited about this idea, and then there is investment and resources available. That is secondary. What is more important is people with exciting ideas and enormous capacity to drive forward. And I told you this story from an institution called IIT Madras. And that story is natural minerals break spontaneously in charged water microdroplets. It occurs only in water. No other solvent makes this? Only in water. Water is unique. Water is love. Water is all that, right? Water is life. Studies on a variety of materials have shown that this happens. Facile due to a process called proton-induced slip, which I simplified in some way. Detailed investigations are essential to understand in the droplet how it is happening, and implications to production of specific nanomaterials and soil in general is fascinating. I told you the story from IIT Madras. We are building many things there. So this is a microscopy facility. It's a big microscope with which we can see water molecules. Water molecules. And we have an international center for water where we do research in this area. And we have a lot of students. This work that I showed you is by this student who has finished her PhD, and she is now going abroad for her postdoctoral work. This was done by a person called Umesh Wagmare, the computational work, along with his student, Koyendrila. And the work is one tiny bit of research from IIT Madras. This is currently headed by our dear Professor Kamakoti. Earlier, the director was Bhaskar Ramurthy and a lot of others. And because of the generous support and enormous institutional, backup, I am in a position to do things of this kind. And also, of course, because of great many students and enthusiastic people around. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Pradeep sir, for the wonderful insights. I cannot even imagine talking about soil from the perspective which you are showing, because from naked eye, we can't even imagine nanoparticles. That's first part. And also that the moment when these kind of subjects are discussed, people like me, lay person, I will say like me, we almost distance ourselves thinking that can we really make sense out of it? Can we understand about this subject, or do we need hard science? But you really showed it from a very simple way when you started with the big rock, and because as a layperson, I know that weathering happens. But I know that it takes thousands of years for a big rock to become a sand. But when you say that no, even a sand can be taken further, and even water droplets can be taken further to nanoparticles. You remind me of a friend who was studying with me during my Cambridge MPhil. And he was bringing these nanoparticles and will ask me, look, I have brought some nanoparticles for you. And I used to always think that he's fooling me. Every week he will bring something in his hand or paper, but actually there was nothing which I can see. Just to, again, as you mentioned, to bring that interest in among the youth. So if these kind of nanoparticles which you are talking about, and what the beauty of your talk, which I can relate with what we have been trying to do in W4W as Water Conversations, is how small initiatives can even take up, large problems of the world. And you have beautifully linked it with the food crisis. You also linked to large extent with one of the three planetary boundaries problem which we are facing in climate crisis, which is the soil degradation, which is now one of the major problems as identified as three planetary challenges, apart from biodiversity loss and water crisis itself. And linking it with water makes it all the more fascinating for our platform. So with your due permission, I would like to ask you a few questions as part of the second session. And I request the participants who are here, I see few participants are also in YouTube. You may drop your questions in the chat box, or if you are on Zoom, you can also ask and raise your hand, and I will allow you to unmute yourself and then also ask the question. So let me just start with my own question. When you were talking about imagining a scenario which we see as sand or earth, which we call earth or soil, and when I am trying to link it with, cities' wastewater, which I know there's some part of sludge which also forms, which is like a sand, soil, something as a layperson, the leftover. And then you are also talking about converting wastewater to soil. But at the same time, you are also showing the power of water, what it can do. even with the wastewater. So my first question to you, because you have also worked a lot in water treatment and apart from pesticides and all. So if you are working in this zone of nanoparticles and you know the problems we are facing today in India in terms of wastewater treatment, where are we standing today in using this kind of material or technology to address at least a bit of wastewater treatment or recycling crisis in the country?
Well, a very interesting, important point. The question, any materials-based knowledge, from basic science to applicable, something applicable in the field, the time scale is about 10 years.
Okay.
And it might be a little bit, difficult to comprehend.
Okay.
It is shorter time scale in comparison to a drug molecule. But
Okay.
certainly it is much longer than an information technology-based solution. Now, it is important that this discovery is now converted to kilograms.
Yeah, you also mentioned that, but
Now the kilograms have to be converted to tons. The
tons.
tons have to be converted to millions of tons. And this has to happen at an affordable cost.
Yes.
Nobody
I
is
think
going to
that's your
buy
challenge you have taken on yourself, how
Right.
to make it affordable.
Correct. Nobody will take a water. Everyone wants water, but people want it at affordable cost.
Yes.
Nobody is going to take the soil at an exorbitant cost.
Yes.
Because food, think about it. A tomato is just one tomato I'm talking about. Maybe coming for 2 rupees. But think about it. One tomato cannot be made even with the entire GDP of the planet.
Seriously, yes.
Yes. If you want to start making tomato from first principles, it cannot be. Only plants can do it. You have no way to build a factory to make a tomato.
It's just like, no, we cannot make water.
Yes.
Also.
So I'm saying, having said this, it is important to have affordability
Yes.
in any technology. So that's the next challenge. This is the pipeline that I told you. I am on this, and so therefore I am telling you it takes at least 10 years. But it is possible for governments to invest in to make this science feasible technologically. And you may ask me, hey, where am I right now? Yes, I am. I know that this works. That much I can reveal that it works.
But you need the army of youth who are interested in this kind of subject.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Important.
So
It's
my
them
next,
that, it's important that for them that,
absolutely.
yeah, thank you.
They get inquisitiveness out of it. My next question to you made it a very interesting observation and shared with us that water has the capacity to break things, the hardest of the things, and also nanoparticles also have that capacity. But at the same breath, you also made a very interesting observation that if it can break something, it can also consolidate or make something, which where you were talking about working in terms of food grains and in soil. And I was just wondering, I mean, in a time when we are so much into GM food and all, and food prices is increasing, it's not that we are not producing enough food. There is enough food which is produced. It's that the wastage of the food is problematic. But then how do you relate with when we used to have, which we call so-called organic food today, but in the olden time, there was nothing like organic or not so organic or genetically modified. Where do you think, as a science, it is standing in terms of looking nanoparticles as a media to really take up food production? I mean, not in terms of scale, as you did clearly mentioned, but our acceptance in terms of policy, in terms of science. Where do we stand today? I mean, I know you are one of the unique, I must say, unique scientists who really advocate for it. But as a society,
nanotechnology in agriculture is expanding. We have
okay.
nanotechnology advisory forum as far as as far as agriculture is concerned. There are large number of fertilizers in nanoparticle form which are coming. A more effective way of delivering pesticides is coming so that pesticides don't really get wasted and they don't contaminate the water and soil. They just go to the real region of application. The micronutrients are applied, lots of things. But you touched upon the possibility that these nanoparticles can also do harm.
Okay.
So
Yes.
this is also being evaluated. So there is very important nanotoxicity evaluation that is being done. So any materials and technologies that we work on, we also study in addition to their benefits, we also study their risk. Only when that is understood and when there is no risk that are causing, well, damage to people and the environment, only then they are deployed. So as far as our water technologies are concerned, no nanoparticle will go out to the environment.
Okay, wonderful.
So all these are independently evaluated. So those are very important points.
Absolutely, because when we are making good science, we also have to be constantly checking, I mean, it's like a 2 steps ahead, but 1 step back and looking for reflection and self-correction and all that.
Very
I want to touch upon the point which actually when I learned about it, which attracted me to learn more about you some many years ago, I must be honest on that. And I'm really fortunate to meet you for first time, but I have heard you at few platforms in the past. You're touching lives of millions of people through the nanoparticle filters, through the water purifiers. And this is also something that first time, even in my own career, I learned about nanoparticles and its relation with purifying water. I mean, I'm talking through my career. And I would like to know your experience because this one experience, a lab experiment which has been upscaled and very successful. Because when we are talking about the food, just before this point which I'm raising now, you mentioned that it's in a process and now it will take its own sweet time, which is kind of 10 plus minus. But you have already upscaled your previous experiments, and one of these experiments where you have touched lives of millions. How was that experience for you to take a lab experiment to to upscaling it and making it a kind of a commercial project as well as a social project? What it takes for a scientist to really, because you have done many of those incubation and upscaling. So if you can explain that experiment and also in terms of an experience of upscaling it, it will be very useful for many startup youngsters who take up these experiments, and they also, and you know that the government of India is doing a lot of efforts to help youngsters to upscale their projects. So your experience when you upscale it.
Sure, very important point. It is sheer will.
Taking risk also for
So
you.
you have to be convinced about what you do, that it works. And you have to take that extra mile. Because nobody will give me additional time to do this. Well, I'm doing a professor's job. I do my teaching. I do my research. But if I have to have a commitment to deliver this, I must be investing additional time, effort to ensure that this is successful. So I walk an extra mile. When I walk an extra mile, I do realize that I am not the only person in a position to walk that extra mile. I should take my people along and walk with them. When I walk with them, I have a responsibility towards them because they are youngsters. Their life. You are risking that. So you have to take care of them. Now, once you do this thing, you have a responsibility to society. You have to educate the society. There may be hundreds of policy problems obstacles that you may encounter. You have to work on them. You have to carry your institution behind you. So all of those, there is a whole lot of huge load that you are taking, especially on something which will risk human life. I give clean water, I say, but actually that clean water can also destroy, right?
Yes.
So my clean water has to be really clean, and I must be responsible for it.
Yes.
It takes a whole lot of responsibility on me, and but then when I'm taking responsibility, my institution should say that, Professor, you're taking the responsibility on behalf of my institution. I am willing to back you up.
Yes. So it's
So
like a ripple effect,
it's a whole lot of such
chain.
collective chain, and this has enabled me. And so I ask, so anyone who is interested in listening to this discussion, do you have the passion?
Hmm.
Are you willing to walk that extra mile? Do you have a mentor, someone whom you can lean back and take, someone who can support you, share resources, what have you? Do you have institutional backing? Do you have resources with you? Someone else's resources, your resources, friends' resources, what? You have these with you. So once you have these, you are ready to walk. But most important is, do you have in your, are you committed to this? And that is the question that you need to ask. A very, very, penetrating question. And once you have answers for it, many people, many children or many kids have this, right? Many young generation aspiring innovators do feel it at various ages in their life. Some may be, age is not a criterion at all in this. It can be
Yes.
very young children to very, really old people as old as me. All have, this kind of excitement. Now, oftentimes they get stopped because of a number of factors. Most important factor today's in Indian society used to be that, well, there is a career path.
Yes.
After degree, go for a job. Innovation, entrepreneurship is risky. Government has removed a lot of such risk aspects, and today
Yes.
people are willing to give their children, well, daughters or sons, to entrepreneurs. This is acceptable today because of many changes, and kudos to government. But there are still barriers. In IIT Madras, it may be possible, but next door in another university, it may not be possible. Here in our institution, we can file a patent, I can tell you, in 3-4 days. It may not be possible in another place. So all of those are issues. I think once your institutional backing is clear, your own inner strength is telling you that, yes, you go for it. You are ready to pursue that passion.
I can really see a kind of passion you carry. And I wish I had a mentor when I started my career. I would have been a very different person. But I am self-mentoring now through all of you in all these 323rd session today. And I have just missed physically attending only 3 sessions. So I have really sat through 20 sessions and learning from all of you. So it's like a classroom which I'm trying to create and learning for myself so that I can also mentor many younger generations. I can completely relate with the role of mentor, the role of institutions. I never had that backup, but I can completely value that, how it matters to take risks for these kind of important innovations which can really change a lot of things in the society. And one such change which you were talking about, which caught my eye during your presentation, and that will be probably my last question, also keeping the time in mind. And if anyone from the participants, and I see few people on YouTube also, please drop your message or comment so that I can read it out for sir. Or you can unmute if you are on Zoom and ask him some question or comment. My last question to you is, which is very interesting for me, and I see a very deep connection where it can go further in this kind of studies, is that water droplets and nanoparticles, as we were talking about, amino acids can be formed, which actually means that proteins can be made, and then you took it further to talking about life. I'm just thinking, because this whole conversation about life makes it very interesting, because water itself is kind of a metaphor to life, And when you're talking about the smallest particle we can imagine in life, in our otherwise life, and you say that life can be produced. I'm just trying to understand as an inquisitive child, uh, producing protein and producing life. Can you just little bit enlighten me on that?
So the ingredients of life, uh,
Yes, ingredients of
basic
life.
ingredients of life are known.
Like we are made up of this Panchabhut, Mahabhut,
Correct.
and yeah, yeah.
So the basic ingredients are, or these carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen,
Yes.
then they combine together to form these biological molecules, the proteins, the nucleic acids and structures of this kind. We know that nanopartic the droplet science can create all of these individual tiny pieces.
Mm.
Once these pieces are there in this, they can also assemble to
Yes.
form structures similar
Yeah, you
cellular
showed the structure
structures.
also in the water
Yes.
droplets. Yes.
The cellular structures that can
Mm.
also form. Now, this assembly, molecule and their formation, their assembly, this much is understood or this much is known to exist. But beyond that, what happens? This is something that needs to be explored. But remember
Absolutely.
that in a droplet of that kind, there are many, many millions of species can be put in there. Droplet
Yes.
is very tiny, but even then, molecules are much, much smaller. You can put a lot of stuff in there, and all of them can organize in different fashions. So at certain kind of conditions, it is not improbable to think about molecular organization similar to biological organization in droplets.
Mm.
Therefore, I say that this can lead to, but need not necessarily be by one droplet making a cell or something. There can
No.
be many, many processes, many, many droplets over many periods of time synthesizing something. It is not that all the molecules that you are making our body are made at one instant in time.
No.
No. So therefore, such a possibility indeed exists.
Risk. Mm. And that is a kind of a inquisitiveness one may really take into account and go further
Right.
in investigation. Wonderful. And from your conversation, which I don't have question on it, and I can relate with why it is important for us to take it very seriously when we were talking about, data science, And you did mention that hundreds of data points and data collections are done and they are assimilated. I'm just wondering when we talk about water management in the country, I remember Niti Aayog itself talking about that we are data scarcity, more than water scarcity country,
Yeah, sure.
and that's a very important point. And when
Yes.
conversations are the little conversations which we are trying to gather from all gems like you. We are just putting them together like a necklace with different people really telling us different kinds of stories about water, so that people start acknowledging and appreciating the beauty of water and not really save water because there is a water crisis and they have to be afraid of it. They can appreciate water and start saving it apart from just being afraid and start saving. So making water everybody's conversation is kind of something where people get interested in water and then start talking about let's do care about it and conserve it. And I think that is where this kind of science comes very handy. But if we hear from the horse's mouth, I mean to say when we hear from legends like you, it makes it much more accessible for us that we can also do it. I'm sure Professor Pradeep also started at some point in time as a student, then as a junior teacher, then as a professor, and then we look up to you as inspiration. So I don't have question on that, but definitely gathering data about water knowledge and then also transmitting it through a citizen science is an important task which we have taken as a responsibility to make water everybody's business and do as much as water conversation as possible. So I'm pleased also to share with you that We will continue at least until December mid. We have some sessions lined up. As I also told you in the beginning, we are here to collect the knowledge and then disseminate in as many ways as possible. So I would like to thank you first of all for your time and passion which you showed when you were talking. I could see the passion and feel the passion. And I would like to quote a phrase from Rumi's work, the great philosopher Rumi. We may be a drop in the ocean, but in each drop, we have the potential of an ocean. So we have to just, explore ourselves. When you were saying are you passionate enough, then you can find your people around. Like these droplets come together and then they can, bind each other. And as a water community, we have now more than 500 speakers who have spoken on this platform. So we have a big community. We are together here. I would like to announce the next session before I close the session today. So we are taking a small break during Diwali and we have Wednesdays for water session on November 6th, when we have officials from International Water Association, IWA, Francois Bernard Drake, to talk about water and wastewater management and bringing his insights from Global North and Global South. Then in the forthcoming Friday.Waters, which is again after Diwali on November 8th, we have a student PhD student on thesis club session from Chennai, and she's going to talk about evaluating reframing of Pallikarni wetland from Chennai, and she's doing a social ecological study in her PhD in architecture planning. We shall also continue with Monday Munching with Women for Water. For now, please do visit our website and do keep looking at what we are doing. We also do on-site activities, but this is our signature program to really gather this water knowledge at one place and accessible to everyone. So our website is www.w4w.in. For any more information, do write to us. We are very happy to hear from you. Thanks a lot. Please take care and bye-bye. And thank you so much, Pradeep, once again for your time. Thanks. Thank you.